Okay, and I will now pass straight over to Adrian to share with us.
Right, hold on a second. Let's see if I can get this to work. Right, hi. Hope you're well, and as I say, welcome to everyone that's joined today. I will first of all just quickly go over a bit of a background of who DM Focus is, so you've got an idea of where we're coming from. And then I was trying to work out of a funky title, and the title I came up with, Whose Audience Is It Anyway? And really and truly, it's about the Christian marketplace. And, obviously there's Christian, how does that all work? We've got Christians out there that donate to non-Christian charities, and we've got non-Christian organizations that tap up Christians. And we've also got Christian organizations that tap up non-Christians as well. So we've got a bit of a four-way thing going on here where you've got 4 points: Christian, non-Christian, organization, individual, and we've got all that going around. And how does that all work? And hopefully at the end of this, you'll see how, as a media planner, as one of the roles that I do at DM Focus, how we go about in the traditional marketplace of inserts and other channels like this. How do we go about making it work for everyone, really, both those in Christian organizations, those in non-Christian organizations, sharing out the love between all these different individuals that are out there that we can target. So, as I said, we'll first of all cover who we are. I'll then look at whose audience is it anyway. My little pun on whose lines anyway. If anyone's old enough to remember that, you don't have to be too old. I used to watch it when I was about 15 or 16, I think, so 35 years ago maybe. Media channels that we would predominantly use for this market, and then finally looking at judging success and how do we do that, because there's some interesting metrics that we use that can be useful for all organizations. So we'll run over that afterwards. So who we are currently, we're an agency that works in the not-for-profit sector. We currently work with about 50 organizations every year. I think this year we're actually going to be working with about 60. And we've got a wealth of experience. We look at data analysis, media planning, and print buying. So we've got those three areas. But I think today's session is going to really focus on the first two, which is the analysis of the audience and the actual channels that we can use to try and reach this marketplace. So I set up the agency back in 2004, 21 years ago. Can't believe it. I honestly didn't think it would be going for 21 years, but we are still going strong today. Totally independent. I'm the sole owner, which is it's good in one way, has its negatives in another way, but it does mean that in times of change, we've been able to turn the ship really quickly. And some things such as when COVID hit, we were able to help in organizations really quickly with the way in which we worked, and other natural disasters which have happened. I can remember being called, we work with a lot of aid agencies where, a recent example would be like in Turkey, where there was a big earthquake. We turned around an ad in 24 hours and had it in the paper the next day. So it enables us to act really swiftly, which we really like to do. We sort of set up really as more of a media buying agency, but really and truly, we like to see ourselves not as a media agency or a data analytical company or a print procurement agency, but rather as a strategic partner, so that when people join us, we hopefully can join together. You can share the love and we can share the love, and hopefully together come out with a good campaign. We're not massive. There's 6 of us all together, so we're not very big at all, but we've got a very good knowledge and hopefully know what we're doing in this area. Hopefully that's progressed through our clients. So we don't just work in the Christian sector. We have a number of Christian charities that we work with, Bible Society being one of them. I think they're one of our oldest clients. I can't remember. I'd like to say it was 2005, but I could be wrong. It might have been 2006, but it's a long time ago for sure. We've worked with SAT7 this year, Mission Without Borders this year. Both of those obviously Christian oriented tool. But then in addition to that, we work with Crisis and Independent Institute for Council Research. We do analysis for 4Paws. So we work with a variety of not-for-profit organizations. Our services that we offer, as I say, from a media perspective, which we'll go into in a bit more depth in a minute, because I think it's really important for what we're talking about. We still do direct mail, even though people don't always think you can still do it, but through legitimate interest, it is possible. Hard in the Christian sector, because, and we'll go over that possibly a bit later. Inserts, all sorts of different ways to use an insert, which we'll talk about. Press advertising and advertorials. Door drop can be really useful. Normally, we find that really useful for local targeting. So when we've got hospices or hospitals or animal welfare charities, which are looking at a very tight region, door drops work really, really well. Or if your brand is big enough, I always say that if you go out on the street and you say your charity name, and if 5 people know who you are, you might get a door drop to work. If it's less than 5 out of 10, don't bother, because it just won't work. We do some outdoor, predominantly for campaigning. So we've done recently for Amnesty. They did quite a few bits around a few areas this year. DRTV and radio. DRTV is a bit of a changing landscape all the time with regards to smart TV and things like that. So with regards to AdSmart, where you can target again at postcode level and start to look at who the person is watching it rather than the channel that you're going on. So there's some interesting developments over the last few years there. And we do a very small amount of digital. We often find that a lot of our clients are either too small and they'll just twiddle themselves and do it, or they're massive and they'll twiddle themselves and do it because they can afford to employ 2 or 3 people to actually manage their socials, etc., on Meta, etc. We do some artwork in-house. Predominantly it's for reworking. It's predominantly for things like when we've got an emergency, it needs to go out tomorrow, and doing some odd changes. Data-wise, we do a lot of campaign analysis, recruitment and retention strategies to try and work out what's been working, looking at longer-term lifetime value. We do a lot of pen portraits to try and work out who our customers are, to enable us to then develop the right creative for that audience. We've got a bespoke toolkit, which I think I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute, which is really quite cool to enable us to look at campaign analysis again, and it's all in one place, in one format. And we do a lot of data processing for warm and cold appeals so that data is clean and ready for going to the Royal Mail. And finally, we do a lot of print procurement. That's probably 1/3 of our business as well. So we multi-source our print, so we'll buy an envelope here or we'll buy paper there, etc., etc. And we've recently set up things like print trains where a lot of our clients use a very similar format insert. So we print everybody up together so we can share the love on paper orders and things like that. So that's a little bit about who we are. Now, $1 million question. Whose audience is it anyway? Christian audience. Is it mine? Is it not? And it's a real interesting one. And interesting enough, I'd say over the last 20 years, if I look at inserts in particular, which is one of the key channels that I've been using over the last 20 years. When I first started, of course, in 2004, direct mail was quite big as well, because we could target all sorts of direct mailing lists. We could target from Experian. They'd have, what church do you go to? With regards to BCA, Book Club Associates used to have a list of people that have bought Christian books, and you could buy that. Britannia, you could buy people that had bought, Billy Graham's, whatever it was, or or a song by, from the latest edition from Spring Harvest or something like that back in 2004. But a lot of those things have gone by the wayside because either the businesses aren't there anymore. The likes of BCA, etc., have closed a long time ago, and those lists aren't available. Or through the introduction of the Data Protection Act in 2004, not the one that came out more recently, and not the new one that's going to be coming out when they ratify it, which who knows? Talk is January, but we'll wait and see. It might be February, might be March. Individual organisations have been less keen to sell their data, and also the remit of how they have to work. We can't do that. But from insert perspective, there are a number of inserts that we can go to. But again, we are losing titles every year. So this year we've lost Life and Work in Scotland, for example, and we've also lost Church of England newspaper at the moment until we're not sure where that is. So. And not only have we lost titles, and we've lost Alpha, we used to be able to insert in there, and we can't anymore because they don't allow it. We used to be able to insert in New Wine, can't go there either. So there's a lot of titles that have disappeared. During COVID, we lost all of the diocese papers in the Christian for Church of England. We did lose the Catholic ones as well, but most of the Catholic ones have come back. But we've also lost the readerships. So whereas I was chatting with hymns, the hymns, I forgot what their full title is now, but who manage Church Times and Magnet today. And both of their readerships are going down again. So when I first started working in this sector, Church Times was about 28,000. It's going to be 13.5. So we're seeing diminishing returns here. And as a consequence, what we've seen is some of our clients are actually thinking, well, actually, some of our Christians, just because they're Christian doesn't mean they only read Christian titles. They do read other things, you know. Funnily enough, some Christians go out for a run and they might read Runner's World. Some Christians like to bake a cake and read good food. So it's about, are there any of those titles which have a high enough saturation for us to target? And secondly, is our message going to work in a market where the market isn't solely Christian? And I think that really depends on who you are. So there are some clients that, sorry, is the sound all right for everybody? I can see a message there. Is anybody else? Yeah, you're okay, Beth. Brilliant. So there are some of our clients that we work with, Bible Society being one of those. I think it'd be very tricky for us to do an insert in a title which doesn't have a high saturation of Christians because of what you're offering them, what you're trying to attract. Whereas there are other clients of ours, that's again a Christian charity, somebody like Mercy Ships, actually there's a number of the secular audience will still give to that cause, because actually it's not just about the faith element that they're giving, they're also giving about the cause that they're trying to do. And that's where this lovely line, low to high at the bottom, the importance of targeting a Christian audience stands out. And I can think of things like, you know, if we're looking at bigger brands, if we were to look at the right-hand side, we'd be looking at things like the Children's Society, Salvation Army. I think we could put Mercy Ships in there. We could put Mission Without Borders in there. The work that they're doing over with regards to Ukraine in Moldova, etc., is right for everybody, whether you're a Christian or not, and non-Christians get what they're trying to do. In the middle, it's interesting. I've worked on both Christian Aid and CAFOD, and Christian Aid sometimes used to find that the biggest problem they had was the word Christian in their title, because lots of people would like to give and they understood what they were giving for, but they sometimes found that a barrier. But obviously they couldn't get rid of that word because that's exactly what they were built on. But they can get to a certain degree the secular audience to donate to the Christian market. Whereas, as I said, I think, Beth, you'd agree, I think we've had the odd one or two titles where we've managed to get it to work, with regards for you at Bible Society, and I've done similar things with Sat7 as well. But predominantly, probably 99% of where we have to go to, we need to know they're Christians. And because who wants to, you know, support somebody that's going to be giving out Bibles? Well, you have to have a living faith. You're not going to do it otherwise, I don't think. I think it'd be very, very hard for us to see others doing it. There's always one, there's going to be one that isn't, but I would say that 99% of your donor base would be Christian orientated. Hold on a minute. There we go. So what are the most popular media channels for a Christian audience? So the ones that I've labeled out here is inserts, press, radio, DRTV, and then digital as well. So with regards to inserts, as I said, many of our clients use inserts. Last year, as just at DM Focus, we placed 60 million inserts, and we're quite a small building, right? So there are still hundreds of millions of inserts being placed every year in inserts, and there's a good reason. You're not going to get that number if it isn't working. They're doing it because it is actually really, really working. It's very easy to respond. You can respond in multiple ways, either through, you know, having a QR code and going online, or you can have a form to fill in. There are still lots of titles to target a faith-based audience. And I do find that in the Christian market, we do have this, we have to test it with regards to the split of Catholic other, you know, whether it be, some of them are sort of like go across multiple Christian faiths. I'm trying to think of the right word. Denomination is the word I'm looking for. Whereas we do that. Those when can we get an evangelical type title to work, or can we get the church times to work? The biggest juxtaposition I normally see is Catholic versus not Catholic in the Christian market, and we often find a lot of Catholic titles work very, very well as well. Not only if you're a Christian, more Catholic-based, faith-based organization, you're up against a lot of non-Christian charities, because we get so many of our non-Christian charities working in that Catholic audience. It's really surprising how many would work in there. There are a few titles out there, as I said before, that we can get even the likes of a Christian charity that's only after Christians to work, where we know there's a high potential for them to be a Christian, but not exclusively. I suppose the biggest example of that one would be something like People's Friend would probably be the one that would jump to mind. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with People's Friend, but it's been going for donkeys. But it's a title which has got a backdrop of, I think it just has a high premise to be have a higher number of Christians reading that title than others. So we can get that to work from time to time. When we use this marketplace, we find that there are two common creative formats that are used, either what we call a roll fold or a lightweight insert. So a roll fold insert, I've picked one of our clients here. It's a not Christian charity, but just to demonstrate what a roll fold insert is this is Wood Green's recent insert that they sent out. And what you can see here is where the cat is and where the dog is. That's what you would see. And if you imagine Murphy's Law, it could land on the top, could land on the bottom if you were to throw a piece of buttered bread on the floor. 50-50. Is it going to land on the top or the bottom? So on here, it's 50-50. Are you going to see the cat or the dog as the first thing which pops out of the insert? It's a self-sealing option. You can tear, as you can see it on the bottom page here. You've got a donation form which you can tear off, and then you can gum it, and it becomes an envelope, and you can send it back in the post. And then you have a little bit of space to do this. The advantage of this type of insert is extremely cheap to print, and this is one of the places where we do have a print train in the agency, and sometimes this can be as little as sort of 1.8, 1.7p to print, depending on the volumes that you're printing. So absolutely massively cheap. But what the issue with this type of title in this Christian marketplace is a lot of the media that we buy is really expensive, and as a consequence, it's sort of like it's actually counterintuitive to print something cheap when you're going to such a vastly expensive media channel. So, for example, something like The Guardian, to insert in The Guardian today for some of our clients, it's around £12 or £13 a thousand. But on the other hand, if we're going to go one of the most expensive titles, which is Catholic Herald, for example, it's £200 a thousand. So it's like it's 150 times more expensive to target there. Now, if we put that into pennies, so it's 1.5p, let's say, to go into The Guardian, and it's 20p to go into the Catholic Herald. To print this, let's make it easy and call it 1.5p. So it's 3p to go into The Guardian versus 21.5p to go into the Christian Herald. So you can see, is going into this lightweight format going to reduce the response by that amount to make it work? And interestingly enough, we'd have to see a diminishing return of, well, nearly 12 times for this lightweight format to work. The alternative option is we go down this lightweight format, which is basically have an oversized letter with a donation form at the bottom, which you can have a nice little long letter. You have an outer envelope, and you have a BRE. These sort of things, it depends on the volume, so it's a bit more tricky to say exactly what it would be, but it can be anywhere between 7 and 10p. So if we take those two examples of the media, where The Guardian was 1.5p, and our good friends at Catholic Herald was 20p, you're talking 30p over 12p. So it's almost only half as much, again, to go into the other title. Is this pack going to be more than half responsive? Yes, it is. And that's why we find in the Christian marketplace, because we're going into very expensive media titles, because the audience is so small and so competitive. That's why it's all about supply and demand. That's why we would normally get the DL pack to work more successfully in the Christian market than we would do for some of our other charity clients, which are going into much more mass market when they're printing millions and millions and millions. So it sort of goes, the rule of thumb is if your average media cost is under 4p, you would normally get a flyer to work. If your average media cost is over 4p, you'd usually get a DL pack to work. Now, there's a key word there, usually. There's always some monkey that breaks the rules. Of course there is. But if you, nearly every single time I've done it over the last 20 years, that's what I've seen. Just a few things about why to do inserts and why not. I think one of the great advantages of inserts is that it enables us to target Christians. I mean, I'm not saying they're 100% certain to be Christian, but if someone's reading Church Times, or if someone's reading Magnet, or if someone's reading Evangelical Times, it's probably a 99% chance that we're targeting the right channel, the right individual. The other thing which is good at, of course, is, and I think sometimes that goes away, it's often forgotten, is it's not just a response tool, but it can increase awareness to the brand. So people start to see who you are and they see you regularly in a market that you want to go to. But what we do find with this channel, and this isn't unique to inserts, it's across the board for a number of different channels, is it can recruit a number of anonymous supporters. In other words, people will just send back the money, don't fill in their name and address. So we can't do anything else once they're on the file. The second thing that we can't do is we can't exclude current supporters. We can't phone up, Church Times, say, oh, if John's on your list, could you just take that insert out, please? It just can't be done. So as a consequence, we do, unfortunately, recruit existing supporters. And the third thing, which can sometimes be seen as a disadvantage, but actually, you could arguably say it's an advantage, is that they don't all go out at the same time. Now, why are you saying that could be an advantage? The advantage is it enables you to manage the donations coming in. Because if all the inserts went out on the same day, by preference, they'll all come back on the same day as well. So if you want to data capture them as quickly as possible, you're going to have to do them all within a 2 or 3 day window. Whereas if you've got them going across, you can't do that. I can see in the chat about we'll come back to that later on with regards to your demographics. Interesting question. Just to let you know, give you an idea of the demographics of inserts. We're normally looking at about a 45+ audience. There are some younger ones, but usually it's about 45 to 50+ audience. Slightly younger than it would be if we were to do direct mail, where direct mail would be normally around 60, 65+. Press. We do use press from time to time, but we struggle to get press to work for getting donations through the door. The strength of the channel is things like emergencies, supporting other channels, and we've had some success for doing events and legacies. An emergency, you can imagine, especially if you can make mainstream newspapers work. As I said to you before, going right back to the beginning for Shouterbox, they phoned me up on the Friday evening, said, well, it wasn't Friday, it was Sunday. I had a text saying, help, we've got an earthquake in Turkey. Monday evening, the artwork was delivered to the Telegraph, and on Tuesday morning, the ad was in the Telegraph, done. And it took less than 24 hours to get it out in front of the door. So it's absolutely amazing for an emergency channel. But obviously, when you're looking at it from a Christian perspective, you've only got weekly titles or monthlies or quarterly, so you don't have that same level of being able to turn it around if you can only go to that Christian market. But it can still be very good for legacies, it can be good for events, and it can also be very good for raising awareness and brand awareness. But if you get other audience to work except the Christian audience, this is where it can work really, really well if you're an emergency faith-based charity. I think you get it to work very well. If you could get, say, for example, a Telegraph, a Times, Guardian, something like that to work when you have an emergency, then that could work really, really well. The one thing to bear in mind with press, as I said, inserts has a high level of anonymous. We often find that press has an even higher one. So to give you some sort of idea, the non-rates for the new donor contact rate, usually we see an insert somewhere between 50 to 60%. For something like press, we'd normally see something between 30 to 40. So only 30 to 40% of individuals that respond, could you talk to again? So 3 to 4 in 10 versus 5 to 6 in 10 for inserts. If you were to be able to use direct mail, because you didn't need to get for that finite Christian audience, that's more like 8 to 9 in 10 you can contact again, and very much higher, because we've got the name and address. So if we've mailed Mr. Jones, not very many people go and scrub it all out, they just send it back. DRTV and radio, this is not one of the main focuses of our agency, but it can be good to reach a Christian audience. Obviously through radio, you've got Premier Christian Radio, which have a number of different ways to target that audience. And DRTV, there are a few Christian channels, but the disadvantage with the Christian channels are they're not BARB registered, so you have to buy them in a different way. When we buy DRTV, usually you're doing it based on, I want this audience, and you're buying it on a cost per thousand to reach that audience. But these titles just aren't available that way. You just can't do it. So you basically buy them on a cost per thousand, which is a much more risky way of buying TV. Digital, again, this isn't a massive area of focus for our agency, but one of the things that we have done is we've often used digital and tied it alongside our inserts. So if we are to insert in, say, for example, the Church Times, we would go on their Church Times newsletter, or the same with Magnet, or the same with something like the tablet. So basically using a mini version of the front page of the creative with the headline. And the idea of that is we'd run it over the month if we're doing banner ads, so that they see it, they see the banner ad, and then the insert falls out, and they go, I think I may have seen this before, and then they go out and read it. It's not always there to generate the initial response, but it's actually just to try and continue the trigger. And we've seen it working quite well. We do a lot of that for Toy Box, where we double up with regards to the in the niche titles that they go into a lot of Christian titles, even though so that's one that's pinching your audience, because they're not a Christian charity at all, but I'd say half their schedule is a Christian audience. This type of advertising would nearly always use we normally use it as a support channel. It's not really used to generate the response. And it's interesting, isn't it, with digital? I think obviously excluding Meta, where it has had some good delivery of results over the years, we find other channels such as Google Display, and also this type of just sort of more bespoke banner advertising and newsletter advertising. It's much harder to get that person to then go off and do it afterwards with such a small amount of space that we have to get that message across. But I think it is good to get them to remind themselves when they see the insert to then go, oh yeah, I was going to do that. All right, go on, I'll pick it up and I'll do it. So judging success. What is a successful campaign? $1 million question. One of the things that I think it's important to do is not only look at the short term, but also to look at the long term. And we try to line up things not only at the point of recruitment, but also can we see how they go over time. So as a consequence, at DenFocus, we developed a toolkit to enable us to do that, where we chuck everyone's data in, we chuck all of your data in, not only at the point of recruitment, but also what are those individuals going on to give in their lifetime? And are they doing other things? Are they engaging with you in other ways that make it that they're an important person on the file? For example, have they pledged to leave a legacy? Have they put their hand up to say they will campaign? Have they said they will help in the shop 3 times a week? Have they bought Christmas cards? Have they run the marathon for you? All those sort of things, you can actually put all of those bits together, pull it together and go, oh, okay, that person is very, very profitable. What the toolkit looks like is we enable it to split into 3 areas. So the top bit is just to look at warm campaign analysis, so we can start to see how every warm campaign works. And we can look at it top line, we can look at it by segment, so long as the data is there to do so. If you did any prompting, if you had any creative testing, and we can start to look at response curves to see how many weeks is it usually taking for my warm campaign to come in, just so that we can start to see, oh, hold on a minute, this campaign after week 4, we should be at 80%, but we're not quite where we want to be. Or, oh my gosh, we're way up on what we were expecting. So it just gives you that. The second area is all about yearly trends. So just to see how many people are donating this year, the splits between cash and regular giving, splits between different types of giving channels, whether they've given via inserts in traditional ways, whether they've just come onto the file, etc. But the one which is of use to you guys and what we're talking about today is the bottom one. The holy grail, what I classify as of advertising, is not just about how much money did they make at the beginning, but what's their lifetime value over a certain period of time. And it's quite interesting looking at response curves. And when I start to look at, right, what are the 2 and the 5-year ROIs that we are seeing? Because they're the sort of the longer term metrics that are quite nice to have a look at. So if we're generating an ROI of, let's say, 0.3 at point of recruitment, how long will it take to break even? And how long will it take to get a 2-to-1 return on investment? And how many of these individuals are going on to leave a legacy? And how many of those are going on to pledge? And we've built a tool to enable us to answer those questions that will go right down to the source code. So we can suddenly start to look at, oh, interesting. And we normally go back to I don't know why I picked 2015, but we started it. I built these in I got bored in lockdown, so I wrote this in 2020. I thought, 5 years is good, but I haven't changed the rules, so I'm now getting 10 years worth. I've got 10 years worth of data for most of our clients that we can start to see how things are doing, and it's a really good tool. And it's quite interesting to see how people do give and give and give through these different channels. I mean, an insert is a prime example where most of our clients don't see a break even at point of recruitment. They don't even see a break even in the first year, but over 2 years it's breaking even, and over 5 years you would get a 2-to-1 return on investment. So let me just split these into the 3 views so you can sort of see what you might get. The campaign analysis, this allows us to look at sort of individual campaigns. It enables us to split it by, as I said, segment, creative, and communication type. In other words, was it an email? Was it a newsletter, direct mail? Was it just a standard appeal? Was it some of our clients do raffles? Was it a raffle? Was it a prize draw? Was it asking for a regular gift, etc., etc.? So asking for a legacy pledge. So you may not have expected to get a donation, but how many pledges did you get? When we refresh the toolkit, every single campaign back to 2015 gets refreshed. So, and it's quite interesting to see that even campaigns that ran 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, we still get donations today. You're going, well, why didn't you respond to this one? We sent you that last week. But there is no, we cannot underestimate the stupidity of the British public or the amazingness of our creative, whichever way you want to put it. It enables us to look at response curves, and we can start to track at what points how they're performing against other campaigns at certain timeframes. So at week 12, how are my campaigns working? And we normally would put the costs in if we've been supplied them by the client, so we can start to look at ROI at point for each campaign as well. And then those costs and everything here gets fed into the lifetime value model. So this is sort of a little summary of the top sheet. So it shows you, you can see here, this isn't, I bet you most of my clients have almost the same curve. Week 1, week 2, week 3, most of the results come in. Week 4, week 5, still quite a few, then it's a dribble. And then after week 12, it's amazing, you still get quite a few bits coming in. But you normally see 80% of the responses coming in after 5 weeks. So that's quite a good thing to know. And it's always good to see if you do follow the same age group, the same response curve, because if you don't and you've got a longer curve, then you'll need to delay when the next campaign goes out. If your curve is shorter, then you might be able to put other campaigns in the middle, which you don't know about. So having a really good understanding of this response curve is important. And as I said, it enables us to also break down by how many people gave over £100. Did anyone give over £1,000? So in this particular spoof example, we mailed 23,000, 3,800 responded, 654 gave over £100, and 18 gave over £1,000. Quite cool. They got a 16% response rate, and they brought in £241,000 of revenue. They also got 172 regular givers. And the income to date from those regular givers is £23,000 as well. How many this particular example, we had an idea of what the prompts were and did they hit them, and there were multiple prompts, so everybody was asked for different amounts based on their previous giving behavior, and again, it's not their real data, but it's a segment of it. So you can see in this example, 38% hit the first prompt, 14% hit the second prompt, and 7% hit the third prompt. About 40% is usually about right, is what I normally see from our clients at the first prompts. The third prompt, it really depends on how far you're stretching that ask. So if they've given £20 and you're asking them for £10,000, you're going to get very few get to that 10,000 mark. If you're going from £20 and asking them for their highest prompt of 50, then I'd expect that third prompt to be much higher. The warm, this just basically looks at a slice so we can compare year on year, and it gives us a full view of income split by regular giving and cash, and it can look at separate months as well. So this is just sort of looking at an example of 2022 to 2025, how many donors they had on the file, how many of them were regular givers, how many regular giving gifts they've had, the regular giving gift ratio. So you can see here the majority of them are going to be monthly givers. How many of them were new that year, how many regular givers lapsed that year, and what was their regular giving income? And then the same for cash. How many cash donors, how many cash responses, what's the average cash ratio? So what we're seeing here is actually we're seeing a steady decline year on year on their cash ratio. So they're mailing the same amount of times, but in 2022, the giving ratio was 2.08. In other words, every person that gave on average, just over 2.1 gifts. In the last year, it was only 1.97. Doesn't sound like a massive difference, but actually, when you're talking about thousands of people, that's quite a few gifts that we're starting to lose out on. Why is that? Well, we know in 2024, we've had it in 2023, we've had some tough times. It's getting tougher and tougher with, higher taxes, higher cost of living, etc. And we're all unfortunately seeing that. But it's good to know, so we can actually start to see. We also have like all cash income and then cash income. And what the difference is I take out any outliers, anybody that's given a gift over £5,000, put them somewhere else and just look at, and that's what the cash income is. All cash income is everything. So this is the line which is important to me, looking at how the cash income is working, because the erratic big gifts, we can't always get those. So we just need to, play with what we can play with. And you can also look at monthly attrition for regular giving. So that's quite a cool little chart to see how you're doing and when you're bringing them on. Longer term metrics. So this is where we can split it by media, by campaign date, by creative, by media type. We've got all sorts of metrics, and we can build whatever we like here, but it's really good to actually enable us to do that. So we can start to look at lifetime value to date, the return on investment to date, the percentage of new supporters, the cost per recruit new, cost per recruit in total, additional cash gifts that have come in by year, regular giving totals, number that have given a regular gift and they're still active, how many people have left a legacy, how many have pledged, how many have intenders, and the list goes on. If you ask a question such as, I had a health research charity that asked, do you know anybody that's affected by X, as in their charity cause? And that was captured. So we can actually look at that and say, well, that's interesting. That title has a high prominence. Obviously, if that particular knowing people of that cause, that's probably why it's working. So it really does help us to answer some key questions. The report, as I said, it can do individual campaigns and longer term metrics. And this is just a fluffy thing of what it can do at a basic level. So title 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can call it what you like. It could be Church Times, Methodist Recorder, etc., etc. The date that it went on sale, how many we went to, how many people responded, how many of them were new, how many of them are still mailable, how much was the income that we got in, what was the average gift, how much did it cost, what was the ROI at point of recruitment, what was the cost per response, and what's the ROI now? So have they gone on to give a bit more, which they have, because it's gone from 1.56 to 1.62, and then their current lifetime value. So these three have broken even, these two haven't yet. It's just an example. So just to give you an idea of what you can have. You can also look at media comparisons. So how are different channels working over the last, this is for 2022. So you've got direct mail, inserts, door drop, DRTV and online, and you can start to see how many responders, how many were new, how many were mailable, what the percentage new was, etc., etc. How many have given a legacy, how many have inquired, how many have pledged, how many legators are there, how much legacy income has come in. So it enables us to look at so much more to go, well, that's interesting. So inserts are better than direct mail, or, oh, actually, I didn't realize that direct mail was better than inserts. It gives us a bit more of a weapon to ensure that we're making the right decisions, because we're now actually looking at the data in a more holistic way. And then we can start, there's some charts here, how many legacy and pledges we get every year, what's the ROI from point of recruitment to now, new donors, single cash donors, active regular givers, etc. So you can see it and what the lifetime value is currently for each year, at what point is it, breaking even, etc. So it enables us to do lots of funky things to enable us to make hopefully the right decisions moving forward and filter out the wrong ones. So I think the two things that we need to consider when we're putting through a campaign is firstly, what audience can we successfully reach? How far away from the Christian audience can your Christian charity go? And the only way to do that is to test it and also to use some nozzle with regards to if you know your cause is only going to work in the Christian market, well, then that's fine. But then there are some which are surprising that you can actually get the secular market to work. And secondly, we also need to know not only what are the short-term KPIs, but what do we want to do in the long term? What are we trying to achieve? Because if we know that, we can then make sure that we strive to reach them because we've got the tools to hopefully be able to see if they have got there or not. Yeah, so I think, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So hopefully that was interesting and useful on what you were hoping to hear from. So yeah, there we go.
Oh, thank you so much, Adrian. You've shared so many amazing insights with us today, and you've given us, I think, a lot just to think about and explore, and lots of opportunities to look into, including, the idea of, are there audiences beyond the Christian specific media we've been targeting that potentially could be effective for us as well and could add value to our campaigns? So yeah, really interesting. Thank you.